Here we be, Muddy Creek Forks, Pennsylvania, August 10th, 2008. And that track you see there happens to be the real Ma Pa. One part of it still left, and we'll soon be riding. Yes, today we'll be doing something no one's been able to do since 1954, the year I was born. Ride the Ma Pa. Just bought our ticket to the former station. Oh, our accommodations. Original station and general store. Not the original train though, but it'll do. Open air car.
Only for good train riders, right? They have ice cream in there when we get back. We always gotta get ice cream.
But officially on original Ma Pa rails right now. First time since 1954. The year I was born, as I said. And my cool ticket. I'm in Pennsylvania Railroad, but no one's ever in their lives called it that. Everyone calls it Ma Pa. More like it. Yeah, we're all aboard.
Thank you.
We love being aboard. Yep, I'm not aboard.
Are you ready? It's early in the year.
The gentleman informs you missed a Confederate attack. Confederates on the Ma Pa? I don't think so, but... When the locomotive started up, it sounded like a car starting up. Alright, first time since 1954, the Ma Pa. And it said my first ride at Cass, this train could use a brake job. Said that back in '86 at Cass. Modern accommodations. Typical Ma Pa, narrow right of way. That's what began as a narrow gauge railroad. They converted to standard gauge in 1899. Through the woods, Muddy Creek. About 12 miles per hour right now. Typical Ma Pa speed. Muddy Creek again. Ma Pa S-curve. Very sharp. Typical rock cut here. Deep cut like we're Northern Central. A deep bird cut. Typical tight cut on the Ma Pa. Don't know road this is we're crossing though. Oh, we're stopping. Shouldn't they be stopping for us?
Across the road.
We have to stop every to make sure there aren't stop any cars before we go across.
They did it this way back in the old days, in the 40s and 50s, before crossing signals were on the Monpa.
High Rock Road.
High Rock Road.
Oh, High Rock. Then we're in High Rock, PA right now. No one's done this since 1954. We can look in the very West Virginia, like. Not doing a good speed for the Monpa. Again, Muddy Creek. Bridge. One more S curve. They don't call it route of the screaming flanges for nothing. The route of the screaming flanges, as George Hilton called it, the guy who wrote the Monpa book. He was right. Still heading northwest on the Monpa. According to the Monpa book, there are many copperheads in the Muddy Creek Valley. And Monpa crews killed 100 copperheads per year on average. But still, this video would take forever to get from Baltimore to York. Let me off with the gunpowder. End of the track up ahead. As far north as we can go. What a drag it is. just shut the engine off.
Want to go to York, start walking.
Yeah. We'll not go the rest of the way to York, start walking. Well, Baltimore's further.
You settle down. No wandering around throwing sticks and stones and assorted other things. You're gonna make all the other kids want to misbehave. Welcome to the Maryland-Pennsylvania Railroad as it exists today. Currently it's approximately 8 miles between Laurel to the north and Bridgeton to the south, though we can't really run the whole way south due to some landowner property rights issues. This railroad had its inception in the railroad building boom following the American Civil War. In the late 1860s, early 1870s, there was a group of gentlemen in the York area that saw the need or felt the need for a railroad to connect York with Philadelphia. And their idea was to go to through basically down where we're at, follow the Muddy Creek Valley down to Peach Bottom, cross the river, join up with another group of railroad entrepreneurs in the southern Lancaster County that were forming a group called the Lancaster, Oxford, and Southern. If you've ever gone to Strasburg, you've heard about them. That's the, you remember the ghost train?
Yep.
That's the Lancaster, Oxford, and Southern.
I knew that.
Actually, at one point, their goal was to travel actually go all the way out to Huntington County to join with a railroad called the East Broad Top. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that.
I've heard of it.
And actually haul coal in competition to Philadelphia and compete with the Pennsylvania Railroad. At about the same time, there was a group of gentlemen in Baltimore whose idea was to go find an alternate route from Baltimore to Philadelphia. That plan actually changed a couple different times. At one point, they actually considered not going to Philadelphia, but crossing the river and heading to the Lehigh Valley to the anthracite coal region to haul anthracite coal into Baltimore in competition with the Pennsylvania and also the Lehigh Railroad. At one point, they were actually bitter rivals, believe it or not, at the very beginning. But as time went along, they decided that maybe they weren't going to be able to do what they all really wanted to do. So they actually met and decided to join the two railroads in the Delta area, Whiteford area, and actually create a railroad from York to Baltimore. Originally, the inception was, like many railroads at that time, was to create a narrow gauge railroad, such as the East Broad Top. As many people know, a lot of people don't. We are running on standard gauge railroad track, which means that there is 4 feet 8.5 inches between the inside heads of the rails. CSX, Norfolk Southern, all the big railroads, that's what they run on. That's basically been the standard since, I believe it came from England originally, back in the early, when railroad were first started. But at the one time, a lot of startup railroads were going to be narrow gauge. This railroad started as a 3-foot railroad, which means it was narrower and only 3 feet between the centers. That was a fairly common narrow gauge. The other one was 24 inches, which was for some reason very popular in Maine and other parts of upper New England. The primary reason for that was the equipment was smaller, therefore cheaper. You didn't have to grade as wide a right away. It was lighter, everything was naturally lighter, so the rail was lighter, so your purchasing your rail was lighter. The ties weren't as long. Lots of different reasons. You didn't have to buy or rent as much land from the landowners. You didn't have to get into that whole issue. It was theoretically cheaper. However, as many of the railroads, narrow gauge railroads found out as time went on, there was one major issue. When you met up with, say, the Northern Central Railroad or the Western Maryland and York, which were the connections on that, or the Baltimore and Ohio and Baltimore, one major problem. They were standard gauge. Your narrow gauge car wouldn't go on the standard gauge track. So what you had to do is at each end, you basically had to take anything that you had loaded onto your cars and reload it onto the standard gauge cars. So around about 1900, they realized that they needed to standard gauge to remain competitive and in business, and they actually did do that. They did make it standard gauge. Actually, the cut down at High Rock, where we went through the cut in the rock, that was done around at that time. Originally, as a narrow gauge railroad, you know, when we came up and you saw the creek bow way out around, the railroad actually followed the creek the whole way. Very curvy. That was another advantage of the narrow gauge railroad. You could run a much, because the cars were much shorter, you could run a much twistier railroad. At one time, there was the neighborhood of 16 trains a day, freight and passengers ran up and down this railroad, plus occasional specials. They hauled the mail. They had the mail contract for all the, every little crossroad basically had a store and a like what's down in Muddy Creek Forks. The High Rock, you know where that garage is. There was a store there. There was a hotel there. There was a store in Laurel. There was one in Felton. Red Line was a big stop on the railroad. I don't know if all of you how many know Red Line, but Red Line was actually a very important town on this railroad. It was a very industrial town, the cigar industry, the furniture industry, some other industries. They actually said that that actually subsidized the mail actually subsidized passenger service. In terms of passenger service, they ran people up and down the line. People needed to go to York for whatever reason, or on the Maryland end, it was a big commuter railroad. Even back in the late 1800s and early 1900s, they commuted a lot of people from the Towson area into Baltimore, and a lot of people rode the train. The other thing was, in particular in the Maryland end, was milk. They hauled a lot of milk into Baltimore, particularly from off of this railroad. It was actually at one time called the Milky Way. They hauled that much milk into the York area, or the Baltimore area. They hauled slate out of the quarries down in Delta. They shipped them out for roofing tiles and for shingles. There were a variety of canneries. There was a cannery in High Rock. Actually, when you go back, look to the left, there's a house, a long skinny house. It's actually a double house. That was actually a cannery building. That's the only building that's left from the cannery. There was different creameries. If you had the time, you look at the displays, go to the mill. They shipped a lot of wheat they ground it into flour and also shipped the grain out of the mill. They canned a lot of foods, vegetables. Some of you kids might be old enough. You'd have been probably getting close to old enough. You might have been old enough. Actually would have went and worked in the canneries in the summer with your mother to help earn the family some extra money. They ran continuous service up until 1950. I always get these dates confused. 54?
54 is passenger service.
They canceled was that?
54, they canceled passenger service.
They canceled passenger service, and I think it was 58 they abandoned
the Maryland district, right?
The Maryland district, which was basically from below Whiteford down to
Ask me anything.
Into Baltimore. So they did continue to run freight service. They had some small freight. In the late 60s, early 70s, they actually rebuilt down to the old spur that did run to where they were going to try and cross the trestle across the Susquehanna, and hauled most of the equipment in to build the Peach Bottom Power Station. There was actually hope at one time that Philadelphia Electric built that they would actually buy the railroad so they would have a way to haul equipment in and out, and also to haul their spent fuel out. But as most everybody knows, their spent fuel is still there because there's no way to take it. Nobody, the government still hasn't straightened that issue out. It went through some different hands, and eventually, in 1985, 86 time frame, they filed and received permission to abandon the railroad. Basically, there's a little bit left in York that's part of York Rail now that serves some industry. That's the only little bit that's left. About that time, a group of gentlemen thought this was a very important piece of history and didn't want to see it go away, or all of it. So they bought these 8 miles of track from the scrapper. However, there was legal contention that they didn't buy it directly from the railroad, and since it wasn't a real railroad, it didn't have they didn't have the rights to run trains. There was also a lot of legal issue of how the property ownership of the right-of-way for the actual rails was done, because railroads used a variety of means to get right-of-way, the outright purchase of a certain of property. There was also agreements where they, like 99-year leases of property. There was also issues where farmers or landowners would give rights as long as there was a railroad, they had the right to use it, but if the railroad ceased to operate, it would revert back. And unfortunately, there were the records of all those transactions were lost in a fire at the Baltimore headquarters at some point. There was no clear ownership, so it ended up in a almost 10-year legal battle. And the end result was the York County Commissioners decided that this was an important piece of York County history, actually declared eminent domain and took the property not only from the property owners, but they also took a large piece of property from the Preservation Society, because they had invested money in the mill and the store. They actually owned the one house at one time. And there was a significant amount of investment that also was taken at the same time. And then they created it's not part of the park system, I can't think of an authority. They created an authority, and that authority is tasked with finding somebody to maintain and operate the railroad, and they signed an agreement with the Preservation Society to maintain. I've heard different, I don't know the exact number, I've heard anywhere from 20 to 99 years, I don't know what the exact number is. But that's what we do. We are an all-volunteer society. Actually, we pay to do this. We are members of it. We pay dues to the membership. And our dues, donations, your ticket payments are what we use to pay to keep the railroad running. The only exception has been is we did receive a nearly $750,000 grant from the state and federal departments of transportation that we use to redo sections of the track. If you look up here, if you can see where there's a lot of new ties. It's not been ballasted, they're in the process. And you look up and then you see around the corner there's new ballast. That, at one point, 2 years ago, you would have walked up there and the one rail would have been hanging over the creek. It was washed out that badly. We rebuilt that washout. There was a washout, you'll see we rebuilt down here. There was a bridge, 2 bridges we crossed, we rebuilt. There's another bridge above. There's also a bridge down in our yard on the other side of Muddy Creek Forks Road that we were able to convince the government, that group that was giving the grants, that even though we weren't a true railroad, the historical significance was worth the preservation, and they actually gave us that. Now all that money really did was buy us some ties and pay for excavating work. All the actual track work, pulling up the old rail and ties, laying the new ties and track, reballasting, is all being done by volunteers. The only other thing I can think of is the painting. We contracted out the painting of the building. I wasn't going up the ladder up that high. So now that's, we're always looking for members, we're always looking for help. Everybody knows how busy everybody's lives are, so it's hard getting enough people together to help us. But we have fun, don't we, Teddy?
Teddy's having some right now.
You're bothering me.
No, my battery's dying.
Oh.
Well, we'll have Mommy fix it when we get back. She has your battery. Okay. But this is a family, it's a family, because we have our family, the family in the Mrs. Sansonetti, who's upstairs at the store, and Mr. Sansonetti, who's, here, you give them to me, please, in the mill. Okay. Their daughters, now they're older than Teddy, obviously, but their daughters help out too. We're always looking for help. We're always looking for members. Inside the store, the whole second floor has a display of lots of pictures and information about the railroad itself. They said Craig's over in the mill to give you the history of the mill and the grain elevator. And if you so desire, you can walk down through the yard and look at the other big equipment that is our goal to actually have running on this railroad at some point. Any questions?
All right.
Head back to Muddy Creek Force. I guess in reverse. No runaround track in this spot. As you just saw, I could tell him a thing or two. Okay, we're a push-pull operation apparently.
How does it go? Remind me how it goes. We always watch it.
Again, the Mon Pa departs. Finally got in gear. But again, first time since 1954. The bullfrog brings it to you. Back at High Rock. And there's the former cannery the man spoke of. Now residents. Who wouldn't want the Mon Pa going by their property? Not much traffic on the road, but I still got to be careful. Road's almost empty today.
Mark
25 for stalling. And again, those deep rock cuts. Screaming flanges. Aptly named. Seems like we got back faster than we went out. That's how it seems anyway. Former station and general store. Hope you enjoyed your ride on the Montauk.
Yeah, yes.
Maybe we'll do it again in about an hour.
An hour.
You're ready boarding for the next ride. But yes, indeed, here it is for real. They don't call it route of the screaming flanges for nothing.